It's very good to be here today, and I really appreciate AI Los Angeles in hosting me for this event. Just before I begin, why am I doing this and who am I? I spent 50 years at one firm, HOK. I joined HOK after I got out of grad school, my very first job after graduation, and I thought I would work a couple of years and then maybe get registered and then move on. I joined in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where the firm was founded. There was just one HOK office. And I thought, well, I'll work here for a bit, get some good experience, and then maybe go out west and become the next Frank Lloyd Wright. And each time I got an itchy foot, HOK opened a new opportunity for me. And this allowing me to grow up inside the firm from a junior designer all the way to CEO and chairman of HOK is part of the story here. But it doesn't just have to be HOK. I'll tell you one other short story. When I was in high school, thinking about architecture, there was one architect in a town near where I grew up. And I called him on the phone and asked him if I could come to his office for a visit just to see what an architect's office looks like and interview him, ask him a few questions. He turned me down flat. Basically, sorry, kid, I don't have time for you. And that really stung because I was just trying to get information, just like people are today. So I made up my mind, if I ever got to be an architect and had a young person ask me questions, I would always take the time to hear what they had to say and answer their questions sincerely to give young people some help. So that's why I'm doing this and why I love doing this. The other reason is that I think design has been pushed to the side in our society, design of buildings, cities, and urban spaces, and so on. When people think about design today, they think about the latest smartphone or maybe the Tesla automobile. They don't think about buildings so much. And I think that's not healthy. It's not healthy for our society. And we need to push design back to the center of society. But that means we have a job to do, not just in designing, but creating an environment where design in our practices can flourish. And that's what this is about today. Things that they didn't teach me in school, I'm pretty sure it's not what anybody learned at school. So here we go. We're going to talk about 4 things today. The first one briefly is things to avoid. And then the heart of the presentation is designing your firm and supporting great design. How do you create a firm that will support great design? And finally, a strategy for excellence. You want your firm to be a vehicle that allows excellence to happen and a place where dreams can come true. So let's start with things to avoid. First, too many architects open their practice without a strategy of any kind. Maybe I got a job. And you can practice until the money runs out. That's not a strategy. That's not designing a firm. How about hope as a strategy? And again, too many architects are so much about design that they don't think about the other pieces of the firm that have to be put into place for success. And then finally, partnerships of convenience, where partners come together not because they're united in a great mission or a purpose, but because it's convenient. And everyone that one or the other brings the work in gets to be the designer, which is what they all want to do. And this is typical of too many firms today, where the design that we lavish the attention on designing buildings, if we took just a little bit of this effort and worked on designing a firm, it would pay huge benefits to us and to the people that work for us, and for a long period of time, even past the career of the founders. So how do we do this? I want to just introduce this man, George Helmuth. George Helmuth was the founder of HOK. He is the H of HOK. He was the son of an architect, and he was also the nephew of an architect. The two Helmuth brothers, his father and his uncle, practiced architecture in St. Louis, Missouri in the early 1900s. And St. Louis was the fourth largest city in the country and was a booming city at that time. But the two brothers had I'd call a partnership of convenience. They shared some staff, they shared some office space. They didn't actually get along that well, even though they were brothers, and they both wanted to dominate the firm. When one brought in a project, he wanted to design it and have the other one help. And they both brothers struggled with that practice the entire time George was growing up. Boom and bust, boom and bust. Helmuth described it as a roller coaster. And when the firm was booming, they would hire draftsmen to help with the work. And again, this is before the computer and actually before women in the practice. It's completely different now, I understand. But they would hire draftsmen to help them and train the draftsmen to be better and more effective. And then when the work ran out, if there wasn't something to replace it, they would lay off their draftsmen and be back down to the two brothers. This seared young George Helmuth, because there were times in his life when there was belt tightening at home. And when he graduated from college, he wanted to join his father and his uncle, but the Great Depression was on. In the Great Depression, for those who, we've just been almost through the coronavirus pandemic. It's been a year and a month, maybe. Great Depression was a decade, from 1930 to 1940, basically. So he was seared by this experience, never did work for his father and his uncle because they couldn't afford it. But it caused him to think deeply, and I'm just going to jump ahead. He developed 4 principles for long-term success for a firm. And I'm going to describe these briefly. All of this information is available in my book and in the podcast series by Gable Media that I think you all have links to. I'll have them at the end of this presentation. The first principle is that talented people are the key to any practice. And instead of hiring and firing or laying off people, Helmuth's idea was hire and keep the best people and let them grow up inside your firm and give them a career path. They'll be better and better as they grow up in your firm, and your firm will be better off for it. And some will eventually rise to become the people who replace you and become future firm leaders. That was his cardinal principle. Okay, so how do you do that? Principle 2, well, you have to have full-time marketing. And full-time marketing was almost unheard of in the mid-1900s. But he said you have to have full-time marketing supported by a vigorous public relations program so people know who you are and will open the door to listen to what you have to say. He also said you shouldn't look for jobs, you should look for clients and look for the 20% of the clients that have repeat work. So if you sell yourself to a client and become a real advisor, a friend to that client will come back to you again and again over the years as that client needs more services. So full-time marketing, principle 2. Principle 3, diversify your practice in every way possible. So you're not stuck with just, for example, one kind of building. Learn how to design everything and anything. And every project, whether it's a school or a house or a courthouse or an airport, it's a design opportunity and it's an audition for the next one. And his idea here was that if schools or the school market is slow, it'll be just like the pistons in a old-fashioned now internal combustion engine, where when schools are slow, something will be up, hospitals or airports. So if you learn how to design everything as diverse as possible, you'll never run out of work. And also diversify your practice by geography. Don't just have one office. And maybe in the case of an HOK, there were global ambitions, and HOK finally spread around the world, but you get to choose. And I would say with the internet now making the world a very small place, it's not out of anyone's reach to provide design services to clients on the other side of the world. And finally, architects are not always what clients need. Sometimes clients need an interior design or a programming effort or some engineering help. And so Helmuth's idea was hang on to that client and always be there when that client needs some kind of help in the design arena, even if it isn't architecture. So find a way to provide these services. Now, you might be saying to yourselves, all of you, well, this is fine for an HOK, but what about my practice of one person or 3 people or 8 or 15 people? Well, do the best you can to diversify your practice and diversify the kinds of talent that you have inside your firm. And if you don't have, let's say, engineering in-house, find good long-term, build long-term relationships with engineers that you trust and be able to offer those services to your clients as well as your own. And finally, principle 4, and this had to do with Helmuth's experience with his father and his uncle. He said each leader should really focus on a separate responsibility. This was revolutionary at the time, now 60 odd years ago. And there were 2 reasons. He said leaders should focus because he said, you know, if you do something every day, you get very good at it. And if you do it over a long period of years, you become expert at selling or at designing or at producing the work. And he said the other great thing was that if you have leaders who are specialized, you avoid the power struggles that he saw between his father and his uncle. That is, that each leader has a sphere or an area of expertise, and that was his or her area. So specialized leaders. Again, if you're a one-person firm or a small firm, you have to find a way to divide up your time and marshal your talents, because every firm needs marketing, design, and production offered in some fashion. And too often, I think, we de-emphasize marketing or production in favor of design. So we just have to have all of these working together in order to actually do great work. Just in summary again, the Helmuth 4 principles, and HOK was founded in an unlikely place, St. Louis, Missouri. And because of these 4 principles, plus a few more that we discovered along the way, talented people, full-time marketing, diversity, 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 and specialized leaders, HOK grew to become a firm of many offices in all the continents except Australia, and close to 2,000 people. So that was a foundation for long-term resiliency. Ownership strategy. The other place where firms fail often is that the owners don't think about our design and ownership strategy. And the strategy that I recommend is that you limit ownership in the firm. This is the cardinal one, to active employees. So if you are the partner in a firm, you should not be able to give your partnership share to your spouse or your children when you step down or retire. That should be sold back into the firm, and younger employees should be able to buy in, not just when they get to the partner level, but even buy in a small way as they are learning and growing in capability. And leaders in the firm should name their successors years early. That means that you constantly look for people to replace yourself and work yourself out of a job. And of course, this takes money. Firms often make the mistake of taking all the money out of the firm at the end of the year and distributing it. And that's a fine model, but when you need money to expand your operation or to get through a coronavirus epidemic, or to buy out a partner and it's not there, then the firms fail. That's what happened to Helmuth's father and his uncle's firm. It failed with the careers of those two brothers. If you want your firm to go on and have younger people take it over, you also need a financial strategy with consistent profits. And to supply those consistent profits, you need metrics. And I'm highlighting 3 here. You need metrics around how much you can spend, around how much of a backlog you have so that you can keep people busy, and you need metrics to support cash flow. 3 things that are not taught in architecture school and need to be understood in a very simple way. First, spending. We call it the 50% rule. The total salaries in your office for yourself, the people that work for you, people that make the coffee, the people that answer the phone, whatever it is, all the people together should not be more than about half of your total fees per year. That means if you're earning $10,000 in your year, you should have $5,000 of salaries. 10,000 will support about 5,000 of salaries. Well, what's the other half? People ask. Well, a big chunk of it is what you also pay people in fringe benefits and Social Security taxes and whatnot. And another big chunk is you want to have some profit built in for the end of the year so that you can retain some of it and begin to build a cash reserve and so on. So it's detailed more in my book and in the podcast, but 50% is a good rule of thumb. Workload. How much backlog do I need? I found that in HOK, in a typical HOK office, they needed about 10 months worth of backlog. What does that mean? If I'm earning $1,000 a month, I need a backlog of about $10,000, 10 months worth. If I'm having a very good backlog and it's maybe 12 months, that means I'm actually growing. In the future, I will need to add staff. If my backlog is less than 10 months, if it's 6 months or 7 months or something like that, it means I am shrinking. I may not know it, but I better get busy and find some more work, or I'm going to have to shed some people in order to stay within the boundaries of a healthy backlog. Finally, cash flow, 90-day rule. Fees earned and not collected in 90 days are unearned. Let me just talk about money a little bit. When we, as architects or as designers, earn fee, we do what's called accruing the earning. We make an estimate that we're earning this money, but we haven't collected it yet. You know, at the end of the week, we fill out our time cards and we say, well, we've now earned half of the fee on project X. But until we bill that client and the client pays us, we haven't turned that estimate of earnings into actual cash. Well, the 90-day rule says if I earn the money and I give myself a very generous amount of 90 days to collect that money and get it into my bank. If it hasn't happened, to protect myself and my firm, I have to unearn that fee. That means that I'm not showing it as fee that I've earned. It doesn't mean that I'm still not trying to collect it. And in fact, if I collect it on the 91st day or the 100th day, I re-earn it. But this is a governor that keeps me from having stars in my eyes and imagining that I've got all this money coming in, when in fact it's not coming in. And that tells me I need to call on my clients and say, is there some problem? We haven't been paid. Is there a reason? Could you please pay? Or maybe clients don't pay often because they're unhappy with something. And this is a fine time for them to find a way for them to show you that they're not happy. So those are the 3 rules that would allow you to keep your firm on a steady track. Now let's talk about supporting great design. And what's the purpose of a design firm if it isn't design? That's what everything is focused on. And that's what we should be focused on. And this is the effort curve. In some corners, it's known as the MacLeamy curve, but I did not give it that name. It's just been cited so often that it became known as the MacLeamy curve. It measures effort over time. And this first curve shows the effort that is put into a typical project by a design firm, where we start out with a small team in programming or design, and the team begins to ramp up in the design development phase, and we have a peak of effort in the documentation phase. That's when the building is actually put together so a contractor can bid and build it. And then after documentation, the workload falls off and we have a small, steady team carrying the project through construction. Now, what's wrong with this? Well, there are two big things that are wrong. The first is that our ability to control the cost of the building, the construction cost, starts at a very almost infinite, but very quickly as we make decisions, begins to be reduced until by the end of a documentation phase, it's almost flatlined. That if I can't make the building, if I find that the building is more expensive than the client wants, I have to redesign. That I'm limited at the end of documentation to what? Degrading finishes. I call it stripping out finishes. So instead of marble and granite, I now have sheetrock and terrazzo or vinyl floors and things like that. That's cheapening the building. It's not actually serving the client well or the cause of design well. The other curve, cost of changes, starts out as almost flat. That is, it's relatively easy early in the project to make changes to the design. But as more and more of the design is documented, the cost of change begins to rise. And you can see where those two curves cross. I call that the point of no return. That if you haven't actually solved the building from a design standpoint, from a constructability standpoint, and from a cost standpoint, the project will fail. And you will get another phase at the end, which we call the litigation phase. And that's when the architect and the contractor and even the owner are no longer in charge. It's then up to insurance companies and lawyers and judges. So that's a failed project. I believe that with the advent of computers are very good at things that people are not so good at. They've got ferociously good memory and they calculate flawlessly. What people need to do is use the computer and change the paradigm of design, bid, build to design, build with a trusted partner called a contractor. It's amazing what good things can happen when architects and contractors work as partners instead of as opponents or as enemies. And this is a trend that I believe is the time is now ripe for, which is that design, bid, build, which has been baked into our way of working, is now changing in favor of design, build, or some form of collaboration or partnership between the architect and the contractor, instead of the opposition, the opponent setup that we've had for so many years. If you do these two things, work with BIM standards with the computer and have a contractor as a partner, you can shift your effort in the project way forward in time, where most of the effort is in programming, designing, and design development. You can flatten out the work in documentation, again, because of the computer and the amazing array of new software programs that will allow you to check your design, to check it for cost, for volume, for heat gain, for greenness, and so on, a dizzying array of things. And your project will be more successful. You'll have a happier client, and the effort, again, as I said, will shift earlier in time. And the litigation phase will disappear because you'll have a successful project. That's smart design and something that every firm can do. And again, I think here, if you're a small firm, you can be selective about the contractors you make partners with and the kinds of clients you cultivate and the work that you do to get yourself organized with good 3D modeling, and BIM tools to allow you to make this happen. For a larger firm like HOK, we adopted this, but it took us years of training and retraining to accomplish it. But for a small firm, you're much more nimble, and you can decide on Tuesday you want to do this, and you can get started on it. Finally, a strategy for excellence. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, it's nice to have financial metrics and it's nice to have a marketplace strategy, but what do you want from your firm? Where are you going? And how are you going to get there? So I'm going to build this like a pyramid. You need 4 things. First, as the base of your pyramid, you need united leadership. Now, if you're a sole practitioner, you get to decide. If you're a partnership of 2 people or more, you have to be united in what you want your firm to be. Do you want to be God's gift to design? Do you want to be the greenest design firm in town or in the state or in the country? Do you want to give outstanding client service? Do you want to specialize in 2 or 3 different building types where you have particular excellence or particular interest? And notice that the leaders are at the base of this pyramid. A firm's success depends on the leadership's commitment to the firm's purpose and mission. And leaders, I know in typical organization diagrams are at the top, but the proper place for leadership is at the base, supporting the goals of the firm. Second goal, great design. Now, this second goal could be great service, or it could be diverse design. It could be anything, but it needs to be served well with, again, the support of the leadership, so that all of the things that I just talked about with designing your firm can be supported properly in this arena. Each one of these levels of the pyramid depends on the one before. So if you have united leadership, that's your first step. Great design, great operations is the second step that requires the commitment, ongoing commitment of your united leadership. The third part of the pyramid that too many firms neglect, culture. What does that mean? Well, firms develop a culture of how do they feel inside. And the culture is established or set by who? The leaders, yourselves, if you're organizing your own firm. What kind of a firm do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a firm where people can speak out and ask questions? Or do you want it to be a firm where people cannot ask questions? So I favor, of course, a firm that's completely open, where there are no bad questions and where leaders share fully how their firm is doing with their staff and ask their staff to engage with them to make the firm the best it can be. The HOK culture that was developed by the founders and rediscovered, rebuilt by later leaders, including myself, was this. We wanted to be fully cooperative on the inside, like a big family, supporting each other and helping each other to succeed. And that means that the more experienced employees help the younger employees. And that if someone does something well, he or she is publicly praised. And if someone needs to be corrected about something, that's done behind closed doors. So if the firm is a nurturing place, like, again, a good family. And then finally, dreams. What do you want your firm to be? What kind of dreams do you have about your firm? If you do this properly, you can create a firm where dreams are possible. If you're well organized, well run, you have steady work, you have a really good unified team of people, and you have the right kind of culture, you can actually have your firm be the place where dreams can be true. Maybe it's winning an AIA Design Award for your next project. Maybe it's becoming the design advisor to a favorite client of yours. Maybe it's designing the greenest building or the greenest home or the most sustainable something. So dreams should be part of a firm's strategy, and dreams should take long time to achieve. And you don't get there unless you climb that pyramid and have each one of those layers of your firm in place first. Then you can touch your dreams. And you want them to be real, but you have to work at it. So you can get more information about all of what I've just conveyed to you from my book, Designing a World-Class Architecture Firm, the people, stories, and strategy behind HOK. And Wiley Publishing has graciously agreed to give participants in this seminar a 35% discount if you just follow the URL there. And for those who wish, there's a new podcast series by Gable Media that's 14 episodes that covers the book quite thoroughly, actually, and this is free. And you can get to it with gablemedia.com, Build Smart, as you see on the bottom. So either one of those will allow you to get more information about what you've just heard today. So, and I thank you for listening, and I'm ready for your questions.
All right, so let's see, we do have a question from Julie. So Julie, do you want to ask your question live?
Sure, thank you, Patrick. So George Helmuth's principles obviously are, work in a large firm. So what about smaller firms? How can those apply?
Well, again, as I said, the principles they do apply. They apply exactly. When Helmuth started, he started HOK as a small firm, and the foundation of it was 3 people, and so the small firm became a large firm because of his principles. But you can't jump past these principles. You do need marketing to help supply steady workload. You just do. You can't get around it unless you want to have a roller coaster ride like his father and his uncle. So everything I've just said to you, HOK started as a small firm. Please remember that, and only grew because the partners were determined. They did want to grow. They were determined that as the firm grew, wonderful other things could happen, like specialized employees inside the firm that knew that spent a lifetime working on sports architecture or airports. Well, a small firm maybe can't do that in the same expensive way, but a small firm still needs to have to attract and keep good people, not let them go, and have steady workload in order to keep them busy. And I still recommend, if you have a firm with at least 2 partners, you should look at specializing instead of competing with each other to see who gets to design the next project. Thank you.
All right, we have another question from Tom. Tom, you want to ask your question live?
Yes, Patrick, what are the best ways that partnerships can plan for leadership succession?
Okay, thank you, Tom. Yes, I get asked this question a great deal. Most architecture firms are partnerships. Some are LLCs, and a few are incorporated as INC or Inc. companies. Any of those forms will work. I do believe there are certain benefits or advantages to the incorporation to an INC or Inc. status, as HOK did, but it's not absolutely necessary. I think the key thing that is necessary, if you want to have a firm that carries on, that you have to have the shares of ownership, whether it's stock or partnership shares, shared within the firm of the active employees. When someone leaves or passes away or retires, they shouldn't be able to take the share of the ownership with them or give it to their spouse or their children or something. That is deadly and it's destructive. Architecture firms should not be owned, in my opinion, by outsiders. They should be owned by the active employees. And so there are any number of ways to do it. The HOK way was to create a shareholding company. And as a very young architect, I think I was still in my 20s, I had my first few shares of HOK stock, and it was transformative. All of a sudden, I felt like I was part of something bigger. And it's one of the incentives that caused me to stay in the firm instead of moving on to start my own. Oh, okay, I've already got something special going on here at HOK. So people in your firm who are deserving and who you think can be future leaders, consider giving them a piece of the action. Not giving it to them, actually. Let me just in order for this to have the right value, and in order for you to keep the value in the firm, people have to buy stock or buy shares, not just give it to them. Well, how do you buy that? If you're living on an architect's salary, how does that work? Well, you have to be profitable. And the way HOK mostly did it was it gave people annual bonuses when we had good years, which was 8 or 9 out of every 10 years. And with the bonus pool, people were given enough cash to be able to buy some stock, HOK stock, along with putting some of the cash in their pocket for their family. So these things are intertwined. If you want to have a healthy firm, you have to operate in a healthy way and make profits. Let me just say something about profits. I think too many architects think of profits as somehow unseemly. It's not compatible with great design. I think it's just the opposite. That if you want to do great design work, you have to give people that are doing this work and supporting you a steady job and a way to take care of their families and have food on the table. If you do that, you're acting really like a patron of old. You know, in the Middle Ages, we all know I hope you got the same education I did about the history of architecture. Michelangelo, who was, of course, a famous artist and architect and sculptor and everything else, he had patrons. The Medici family in Italy took him under their wing and basically gave him a studio and a salary and said, and blocks of Carrara marble, and said, here, do great work. And he did. And then finally his patron became the Pope. So that was clients as patrons. Now, I don't know of any client patrons these days, except maybe some museums of modern art. But I think firms can be patrons for their employees, taking care of their employees with good, steady work and a good paycheck and a bonus at the end of the year and a chance for ownership. If you do that for your employees, you will find your employees are better positioned to take care of your clients, to help serve your clients. And in my 50 years at HOK, never once was there not a paycheck every 2 weeks, and the check never bounced. It was always solid. So that's the kind of aspiration that I think, if you want to design a really good firm or a great firm, even if it's small, you should take care of your people and yourselves and your families with good operation that assures a profit. And you will find if you do that, you create the conditions for good design to happen. Good design happens when people have full stomachs and are secure, not when they're starving. Thank you. That was a great question, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. And we have a question from Michael. So Michael, if you want to mute yourself and ask it.
Yes, good morning. We have a small firm and we don't have any aspirations of getting huge because as the principal, I want to make sure that I see everything that goes out the door and it's at a high level, high caliber design. But we're trying to, not recently, but over the years, we've tried to get into a market of different kind of building typology that we've been doing because we have some interest in it. Very, very challenging because what we get is pushback. And as an example, we're trying to get work with some affordable housing developers that we think are compatible with our design philosophy and match theirs.
Yeah.
And the question that always comes back is, how many have you done? And can we go visit 4 or 5?
Yep.
And when we don't have any, it's hard to make that that argument. And what we've done is we've brought on someone as not really a partner but more of a consultant who has done a lot of work. Still, there's a little bit of pushback on that as well.
Yes.
So the only client that we've ever had in 38 years, one said after he hired us to do a healthcare building, I asked him, why would you have hired us? First of all, the contract was signed. So then I asked him the question. I said,
Good move. Good timing.
Yeah. I didn't want to be premature on that one. So he said, well, I thought architects could design all kinds of buildings.
Right.
Well, try to use that strategy with someone else. We have actually tried to use that strategy with someone else that we hadn't done a particular building typology in the past, to say, we have the capabilities of doing this. We bring on consultant staff and that have years and years of experience, but maybe you have another angle.
Sure. That's a great question, Michael. And I think it's certainly true today, more so than it was when Helmuth started HOK 60 odd years ago. The clients want to know, well, how many hospitals or how many affordable housing projects, how many have you done? What's your experience? And after all, we all do this too. If you need to have a hip replacement, you want to know that your doctor has done has experience. You don't want the first time out of school practitioner to work on your hip. You want them to know that you want to know you're going to be well cared for. How do you get past that? Here's two suggestions, and you're already onto one of them. One is that you take some of that pile of cash that you generated because of your steady profits, and you go out and you hire somebody to bring into your firm that has that experience. You can put that person up and say, well, we as a firm, and honesty is always great here. We as a firm don't have this experience. However, we're so committed to this that we brought on Sam or Joe or Joetta to do this work, and we're building a practice around him or her. And then you put that person up front. That's one. And Helmuth always said, if I can't beat them, I'm going to buy them. So you get the talent that you need by attracting someone to your firm, and you have to pay for it. People that have particular experience become like rock stars or sports figures. You have to pay up. The other way, which I think still can work, is what HOK did in the early years, which is that you would say to a client, it's precisely because we don't have this experience that you should take a chance on us, because we're going to take a fresh look, and with working with you and listening carefully to you, your client, and what you need, we're not going to have preconceptions about this. We're going to come up with something that's much more creative, and we may well have insights that allow you to do, in your case, affordable housing in a very special new way that will be better for the people who live there. That'll add an extra unit into each parcel of land, something. And you can also sweeten that. Again, if you have a cash pile, you can say, we don't want you to hire us. We want you to let us do a charrette with you. And we'll speculate on the charrette for 3 days or 1 day or a week. And let us show you how we think before you say no. And often if clients say, well, actually, I would like that, and you take a real project with a real site plan and do some work with them for a day, you'll find, oh, it's often not how much experience do you have, but do I like working with you? Are we compatible? Do I like the cut of your jib? Do you approach design in a way that I appreciate? So I think all of those things can work, but main thing is don't give up. If you really are interested in that field, you should build a practice around it. I will say that when HOK began, let's say, the sports architecture practice, for which the firm became quite well known, it took 4 to 5 years of work before the firm really had a breakthrough. So persistence or grit are the other elements. You have to have some staying power. But I'm glad that you're doing it. And affordable housing that I have seen needs good design work, and most of it is not. So stick to it. Great question.
Thank you.
All right, we have another question from Iwa. If you want to ask your question live.
Yes, hi, good morning. I know it's a weird name to pronounce. It's Ava.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Patrick. Thank you
Good
so
morning.
much for all the information. I find it very insightful and inspirational. Patrick, you showed this one slide, very simple, but so meaningful, where you had a pyramid and at the very bottom, it said United Leadership.
Yes.
So I'm a principal at a very small firm. Maybe I shouldn't say small, very small firm. It's 16 of us. And the core leadership group is 3 people. So there's one president, the owner, and there's 2 principals, or there's a total of 3 of us.
Yes.
Could you please a little bit elaborate on that bottom
Yes.
tier, which is United Leadership? Because I find that we should talk more. We should
Yes.
spend more time talking. And I feel like everybody is just so focused on running projects and doing
Yes.
this and this and that. We find so little time to actually get together and talk.
Yes. Yes. Oh, what a great question. Absolutely. There are 3 of you. That's a good number. That's the way HOK started, with 3 people. Do you all have different jobs?
Yes.
I'm asking you a question. Do you all
Yes,
have
yes. So the partner is so the principal, not the principal, the president is the person who brings in all the work. And then the 2 of us, the 2 principals, we kind of do the principal work, PM work, PA work. We basically run all the projects. So we're in charge of all the projects. So the projects either go through me or the other principal.
Okay.
That's how we split the
Okay.
responsibilities.
So, I would say this. First of all, if you really want to have unified leadership, it's kind of like marriage. You know, if you, I hope many of you are married, and if you do, add the experience of you're married and then you both have careers, and then the children come, you get so busy that you drift apart in your marriage because you don't remember each other as, oh, this is the reason I got married, is because not only do I love you, but I like being around you and communicating. So advice is the same, which is not only get together and talk as leaders, but as marriage. My wife and I, when we got married, we decided we were going to have a date every week. After we had kids, and get a babysitter and get a date every week, just to have time for the 2 of us to remember who each other is. And in HOK, our leadership group, which we eventually called the executive committee, or that was way too fancy, so called it the XCOM. We talked by phone because we were in different cities. So we talked by phone every Monday morning for an hour. We had a little agenda that we go through. Here's what's going on this week and so on. And once a quarter, once every 3 months, we had an XCOM retreat, we called it, still going on at HOK, where the 3 of us, and actually in HOK's case, it was 5, would go off-site. We started by going to each other's offices and meeting, and that didn't work because the office was busy, and people would always say, they'd come into the conference room where we were and say, you have a second, I want to talk about this. And pretty soon the together time. So we found we couldn't have our retreats inside an office. So we began to do off-site meetings. And sometimes it was in a hotel in a city. And sometimes it was in a very nice place out in the countryside. Napa Valley became one of our favorite places, not because there's good wine there, although that certainly was a factor, but because it was so quiet and pastoral, it was easy to think. And it was conducive to good thinking. And we found that those retreats, we'd have discussions all day. And then at dinner was a bonding time. We would have a glass of wine, have a nice dinner, and tell stories to each other, and all of the back and forth and maybe clashes and argument about this and that during the day would fall away. We'd rediscovered that we were a team. And if you're not doing that with your leadership group, if you're too busy, stop, take the time, get yourself out of your office, go to a nice place for at least overnight. When HOK people, when we finally matured our concept for this, our overnights became 2. The first night was really good. The next morning, we met again, and we always had sleep on it thoughts, because the brain does funny things, wonderful things. When you have a full day of work and then you have dinner and talk about things, the next morning you often wake up with fresh ideas about the same thing. So we always started our second day with sleep on it. So we did this for a typical 2.5 days. You can do even one day, but I think overnight is important because you get to have dinner together. And dinner together is the time when you reconnect as colleagues and as partners, instead of just, it's all business. You have to see each other, break bread, have a glass of wine, whatever it is, and reconnect to each other. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Great advice.
Sure. Great question. I love I love any question.
All right, we have another question from Richard. Richard, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Good morning. So I'm actually a partner in a structural engineering firm, and we don't have a full-time marketing person. We have 4 partners. We all do our own business development, so we're pretty much seller doers, and we do projects. And my question actually is, I'm actually pretty good at going out there and selling myself, but then I get stuck. I'm the one that has to do the project in that scenario. How do you break out of that mold and start selling the firm instead?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on that?
And what was your name again, please?
Richard.
Richard, yes. Richard, great question. And it sounds as if you're doing okay, and you have partners that are seller doers, all of you. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'll bet you that some of you are better at selling than others.
Yes.
Because it's human nature, right? So I think you and your partners should get yourself out of your office, go to a Napa Valley and have a glass of wine together or something, and say, okay, are we organized most effectively? It could be that the ones maybe you're the best seller, I don't know, but you could redivide yourself into a seller and somebody that's really, really, really good at the doing. You could do that. And you should at least see if that's possible. If none of you want to sell, I think you have to find a way to get someone else added to your firm who is in charge of selling. And maybe that person who should be your partner would bring work together to all of you. And then you all if you can get somebody to get a client across a table from you so you can sell yourself, that's a marketing job. So in HOK, as the firm has evolved, I think we all probably know that, clients all want to know who's going to be the architect or the engineer on my job, and how much experience, like we had the other question from Michael, how many of these have you done, and so on. Well, you could have a marketer whose job it is just to get prospects and people for you to interview. And then you can all go to your interviews, or not all of you, but individually, and sell yourselves, because that's part of, I think anybody that's leading a firm has to have some selling now. That's the way it works. Almost nobody gets to just not sell. Even Gio Obata in HOK did selling mostly by, and I'll give you a little tip, when it came to Geo, George Helmuth would get him in front of a client, and Geo had this wonderful way of looking intently and listening. He would cock his head so that he could hear what the client was saying and totally and completely concentrate on not look like I'm an architect, I'm a designer, let me show you all my stuff, but what is it that you need? He had a way of listening that drew his clients into him. And after he understood them, and I think it wasn't just their words, it was their body language, what was really important to them. And he was able then to feed that back to them with, oh, well, I think maybe you need to do this or that. So I think you need somebody to coordinate your marketing at a partner level. And you can still all be seller doers, maybe. But if you took a real hard look at each other, you might find that maybe yourself or one of your colleagues should be more focused on the marketing and the other should be more focused on the doing. So the point is, please don't neglect the marketing. If somebody is waking up every morning and having their coffee and saying, how can I get more work for this firm today? You'd be amazed after a period of months or years, how much wonderful fruit that can bear. Anything else?
Thank you. Great advice. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're most kindly welcome. Go out there and do a great job.
All right, we have a question from Nora. Nora, do you want to ask your question live?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you. And I'm Nora Hoxa. Thank you, Patrick, so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. My question is, so what do you recommend we collectively do to help the architecture industry move from one that has a lot of toxicity in firms to the one that is thriving and empowering?
Well, I think that's my mission. You just described my mission, which is to get design firms to the center. And let me just talk about that a little bit. I think we've done ourselves a great disservice as architects. We have allowed ourselves to be portrayed in the popular media, architectural magazines in the old days, and now all kinds of digital media today, where design has become this superficial thing that I'm going to say is more about style or more about the latest fashion, more like clothing than design which is timeless and design which really solves problems. And I think that we need to understand this ourselves first. You know, let me back up a minute. What do we celebrate as architects? We celebrate the new design of these days, it's the museums of modern art that seems to get the most design attention, designed by people, the star architects, starchitects, we call them. You know, and maybe 50 years ago or 100 years ago, it was who's designing the great train stations. And 500 years ago, it was who was designing great cathedrals or palaces. So architecture is a whole lot more than that. And think of all the things that we need, that we should have to make our cities livable places, noble places for people to live. And I don't personally think we're going to solve this one building at a time. I think architects need to think much bigger about the spaces between the buildings and regionals and neighborhoods. And what do we do about reclaiming the edges of cities where they meet lakes or the ocean or the rivers? And how can we get the automobile tamed so that people can take over the streets again in a real way? So I think those are the big things. And here we are talking about postmodern or deconstructivism or the latest fashion. So I think we need to get back to real design that, sure, it solves problems, but it also, in the solving of the problems for clients, making their lives better, also contributes to the fabric of a city, which is where most of us are living these days, urban areas, and makes places that are more noble for everyone. And I would say right now, who's designing our cities? Traffic engineers? City planners? No. City planners are processing applications for projects. They're not designing cities. So I think we need to seize this, and the first step in seizing this initiative is to get a whole lot better at operating. I don't think we can do this when we're struggling as firms. We need to be well run, and so we can support great design. And then we need to tell our story in a new way so that it's not just superficial design, but design that works all the way through, that really counts. And that's my mission. I don't need to do this, but I'm compelled to do it because I think that design needs to be back in the center of things. And there's nothing more important, I think, to people's lives than being in a great environment. I think the environment does, in fact, shape people. And we've allowed ourselves to get pushed out to the side. And the cause of design is to be confused. And so it's our job, especially you younger people, it's your job, seize back this initiative, please. And not just barely make it as your own firm, but see a higher purpose. You know, those dreams at the top of that pyramid? That's what I'm talking about. That we need to have dreams about making this world that we're in a whole lot better. Not just, you know, fashionable stuff, but a greener place and more noble place for people. So that's the great mission that all of us should be on, I think. Not just making our firms work and make a few bucks, but see a higher purpose in this. I do think of it as a mission.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I think we have time for 2 last questions. So the first one's from Annie Chu. Her question is, in nurturing future leadership, what attributes do you look for in a staff who may be able to develop marketing/networking potential? i.e., how can you spot a future rainmaker?
Okay. Wow. Well, let me just first, future rainmaker and future leader. Architecture, and when I say architecture, I'm using it in the big picture. It might be interior design or planning or landscape or just design. People that get into design tend to, and it's a left brain, right brain thing, tend to be engrossed in it, and many of us would be perfectly content to sit in a studio and just work and not reach out, not be part of our community. And did you ever, I'm answering your question in a very deliberate way, by the way. Did you ever get a project with a client and find that, yourself asking, I wish that client had asked me before they got this kind of a building program to fit on this kind of a site? If I could have given them advice before they bought that piece of property or made the decision to tear down that beautiful building to build a new one, whatever it is, that architects should be out there. All of us should be out there in our communities. We should have enough capacity. This is really hard, to not only do our work and run great firms and have a vibrant practice, but be in our community on the planning or design review commissions of our cities, or as my wife did on the city council and mayor. We should be outspoken about issues that are confronting our neighborhood or our city that have to do with design. And if we're serving an area of the marketplace like healthcare or affordable housing, like Michael wants to do, or anything, we should be part of that, not just waiting for the door to be open or for somebody to ping us on our cell phone. So we all need to be out there. We all need to be engaged in our communities or our practice areas, not just waiting again for somebody to reach out to us. And so in that regard, all of us need to let our passion for what we're doing show through. So now let me get around to this young person that, how can you tell if they're rainmakers? I've just said what I think a rainmaker is, and it means that you want people who are extroverts for sure, that enjoy and love being around other people, that seem to make friends as easily as crossing the street, and that are and that people respond to by being, oh, I like so and so, I want to be his friend or her friend. That's the so you want somebody like that. And George Helmuth was the commensurate making friends person. He would make friends with clients and become such good friends. They had a level of trust in him that they would allow HOK to work on a new building type just because they liked Helmuth and trusted him. So that's as fine as it goes. Now, let me tell you the other maybe more important part. Okay, so somebody makes friends easily. I look for future leadership at character. Is this person honest? Are they willing to say, I did that, but I was wrong, it should be this way? Are they willing to acknowledge mistakes? Are they willing to work? How do they work with other people? Do they work well and seamlessly, or are there people that, have that conflict with others? They're like a boulder in the stream that's got all this ripple around it. So I want people who have character, they're honest. And I want people who work well with other people. And I want people who have a passion for the work. I don't care what color they are or gender or anything else. Those are the things that I think future leaders need to have. They need to have, again, character. These are things that you don't get taught in school. Maybe your mother teaches you these things. They're honest, they're sincere. It shows through to other people when you have people like this in your firm. They get along well with other people. They're willing, eager to be members of a team. And they're loyal. They want to be part of this great enterprise that you're building in your own firm. They want to buy into that. So yes, so you want all of that. You want people who seem to work well with people. Those are probably your rainmakers, but you don't neglect the other pieces, which is they have to work well with others, have good character, and they're committed and loyal to you, not to you personally, to the firm, what your firm stands for. Okay, that was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but I think it was good stuff in there.
All right.
Any more?
And one last question before we end the event today. This is from Dixon. How do you balance fee pressure, salary pressure, and the time it takes to do quality work and keep out of litigation?
Well, I think it's right back to the MacLeamy curve. I think we've, the old way that I was trained before the computer to spend a little bit of time. AIA, I think it was formal contract B141, I think it used to be, said, I'm going to spend 15% of my fee on design and 20% on design development, and then 45% or something on production. That was an old way that allowed you to have a bunch of drafts people drawing up the details and coordinating and checking. I think that is not in the great service of design. And we should, and if you have experience with design, if you've designed things all the way through and you have experience, you will know that if you start a project well and the design comes together properly, it gets easy. The rest of the project gets easier to do. If you have a project that is what I call not resolved, it gets harder and harder to go through the rest of the project. And especially when you have the contractor on it, oh my God. So design is everything. And that doesn't mean you should just take forever. I think your question was, I want to do great design, but I've got fee pressure and I've got salary pressure, right? Well, you have to, this is the art of this. But you shouldn't neglect design. Most firms that I know that are struggling with fees, fee pressure or profitability, what do? They say, that project we did last year for that school district, probably will work if we kind of fix it for this project. So we can make a lot of money on this project. You're not supporting great design when you do that. So I'd say go back to learning how to work with a small team, a tight team, quickly, but thoroughly solve that problem of that initial design until it comes together, until all the parts and pieces fit and work, and the project will sing for you. And then use your intelligence, your computer. Hopefully you're all doing three-dimensional BIM modeling. It's a wondrous tools that can actually do a lot of the big heavy duty part of what used to be our job, make it much more reasonable and manageable because the computer is doing so much of it. So if you're modeling in 3 dimensions, get your design right, and then let your model, your BIM model, be the what it should, which is the framework for everything else to get coordinated and fit together. If you have a contractor as your partner or your colleague on a project, contractor can help you by saying, you don't actually have to draw up that detail that way because I know how it works. Why don't you give me an instruction and you can write it out, this instruction as to how I want this to be, instead of trying to be a contractor and think of how to draw. So there are 100 little tricks to this. That is the essence of every architect's job, is to figure out how to be more efficient, but don't be more efficient with design, be more efficient with production. Lavish the attention on design that it needs to really be thought through, because that's your reputation for the future. But you have to, I know you have to get the production part right, but that's where you need to be the most efficient of all. And the other part of the question is, I think if you read the book or listen to the podcast series, you'll learn a whole lot more about the detail that I'm trying to cram 3 years of a book into an hour podcast or seminar. Wow, what great questions.
Yeah. So is there anything you wanted to kind of end with, Patrick, before we ended our session today?
I've had a great time. I love the questions, and I love seeing people. It's a little strange to do a PowerPoint presentation and not hear any feedback or not be able to see my audience, but I've really appreciated it, especially the Q&A. And I thank AIA Los Angeles for allowing me to do this. And I hope that everyone here is a better practitioner as a result. So thank you.